Welcome to Midwife Pip Podcast Bitesize, your weekly dose of all things pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and women's health, to help support you towards a better journey. These episodes are snapshots from previous episodes on the podcast to make sure you have all those golden nuggets of information that you need. And remember, if you're feeling like you would benefit from working with me and having more one-to-one support on your journey, drop me a message at midwife_pip on Instagram so we can chat about how I support women at this time in their lives and may be able to help you too.
There is arguably no time in our lives that we focus more on our health and wellness than when considering a pregnancy or trying to conceive. But honestly, boosting your female fertility can feel like a minefield. Like most things women's health related, there are a lot of myths and misconceptions to navigate before finding the real evidence-based facts. Thankfully, on today's episode, we are joined by a real expert, Stefanie Valakas, founder of the Dietologist. Stefanie is dedicated to providing excellence in reproductive, fertility, and pregnancy health, and is going to help us understand what we can actually do to boost our fertility health, why it's something we should be considering, and what myths we should leave well behind. Stefanie is an expert fertility dietitian and nutritionist, and as I say, founder of the Dietologist. Stefanie and her virtual practice are dedicated to excellence for nutrition, reproductive health concerns, fertility, and pregnancy. And her passion for nutrition in this space has truly grown from her experience helping her clients online from around the world, and also through her own experiences of navigating a diagnosis of endometriosis. You can learn how you can work with Stefanie and the Dietologist team and find out more about all of her fantastic programs and resources by checking out the links in this episode description. Yeah, what's your advice for kind of later in life and fertility?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I always like to talk about it as your age, unless you have a time machine in your backyard that I don't know about, is not a modifiable factor. So whilst it is a consideration and whilst you shouldn't delay any further, I have this great obstetrician colleague who always says there is never going to be an exactly perfect time. There might be some better times in life and there might be some not as great times in life, but don't make unnecessary delays. If you're waiting for a perfect situation, it may not ever arise. And so that's probably some decent advice, but we can't change your age, so we've got to work with what we've got. And at the end of the day, we're not going to grow back any eggs either, so the egg count we know starts to diminish as we get older, and in fact it starts to even diminish before we even hit puberty and we start ovulating, which people find absolutely wild, but it's true. And so we do see a steeper decline in egg count and egg quality, particularly over 35. However, there are lots of lifestyle things that you can look at to help support your fertility if you are over 35, for example, and thinking about either trying for a baby, whether that be your first or your second or whatever that looks like for your family. Because as well, that's often a time where you may have already had maybe one baby before you, one or two children before you were 35, and then you're looking to add to your family. But now you're older and perhaps you're experiencing some delays, which is also called secondary infertility. So the key things that I really like to think about is that 90-day window prior to ovulation, which is that last maturation kind of sprint where your egg is going to go from a little baby primordial follicle into its big mature follicle and then be released and potentially fertilized. So we really want to be focusing from a female perspective on egg quality. And the way to do that is to really protect the egg from any potential harms. And that's usually in the form of reactive oxygen species or free radicals, sometimes they're called. And what we want to do is really boost the antioxidant profile of your diet. So having a really big abundance of fruits and vegetables and olive oil and nuts and seeds and herbs and spices and oily fish. all those things are going to help to support egg quality and protect the egg from this damage. And as well, you want to minimize things that could also enhance that damaging process. So you don't want to go too hard on things like alcohol or lots of saturated fats and deep fried foods and so on. So it's really about protecting, giving it that little shield or that little protective bubble, but also avoiding things that are potentially going to worsen that. And the other factor as well is about our environment, which is really about, how much are we being exposed to endocrine disrupting chemicals, which can mimic our hormones and affect egg quality and create delays to fertility further, irrespective of age. And so all these things come into play, as well as looking at a tailor-designed supplementation plan. And that's just on the female side of the things. As we know as well, age comes into play for males as well. And so male factor infertility often has a lot of delay to diagnosis, but accounts for 30 to 50% of all delays to conception. And so we also need to be working on male preconception health. We know that that's almost equally as important to your child's future health as well as your ability to conceive. So same kind of deal, except with men, we've got a 74-day window where sperm turns over all the time. So in a way, they've kind of got the opportunity to really make great gains when it comes to sperm health within that similar 3-month window as well. And the same kind of principles apply there as well.
This episode is sponsored by Reading Eggs, a program backed by solid scientific research and designed by experienced educators. Reading Eggs makes learning to read interesting and engaging for kids, with great online reading games and activities. It is proven to boost reading levels in just 15 minutes a day. Nurturing our little ones' learning and development is something I am really passionate about. So I'm excited to share that Reading Eggs offers you a 30-day risk-free trial where you can access 6 award-winning programs. All use a British accent and pronunciations in all of their lessons and activities, so you can be sure that your child is learning letters and words correctly from the very beginning. Your child will also receive over 4,000 ebooks in the Reading Eggs library, as well as over 500 printable worksheets to practice their reading and math skills at home. Check out readingeggs.co.uk now.
Well, that's such a good point, because I think quite often when we think about kind of fertility or preconception care, the focus is so heavily on the woman. But like you say, it takes 2, right? We need a sperm and an egg. They both need to be doing their job for it to work. So I love that you kind of mentioned the male factor in there. And is it similar in terms of that like kind of antioxidant rich diet for men, in terms of those loads of fruits and veggies, loads of healthy fats, kind of Mediterranean style diet, I guess? Is that kind of similar, the same for men as for women?
Yeah, absolutely. And with the addition of particularly foods that are rich in zinc as well, because men actually have a far higher requirement for zinc compared to females because of it being lost in ejaculate. And so just like we lose iron with our menstrual cycle, they don't. They have a lower iron requirement. They have the reverse with zinc. So we want to be focusing on zinc-rich foods like shellfish and seafood, legumes and beans and nuts and seeds. So our protein foods, they're really also going to help support sperm function and quality as well.
Well, that's really interesting. And Stefanie, do you, through your team, do you work with both men and women when it comes to
absolutely. We have a very big open door policy in our practice. So, I'm never going to say, oh, you can't work with us if your partner doesn't come to the consultation, because I like to meet people where they're at, and everyone's in a different stage and phase of their journey in their life and so on. So I like to say, any of our services are applicable to a couple, and we're happy to add it on wherever you feel, whether they come along, they just listen. I have heaps of very lovely husbands and partners who just sit in the background and just nod and listen, and that second pair of ears. And then I have the men reaching out and saying, I want an appointment with my partner and we want to talk about XYZ. So of course, there's always going to be a scale of proactiveness in that department as well. But they're welcome to come to any consultations, and we're happy to give advice either through their female partner or directly to them, or sometimes we just do sessions just with the males as well.
Amazing. That's really good to know, because I think sometimes, and certainly when it comes to infertility, there's still a massive taboo around that. And I think when we think about fertility health, people will often assume that either you are struggling, or there's still that kind of bit of maybe embarrassment, or people don't want to speak up about it. And we really need to just normalize it during childbearing ages, I suppose, don't we? And just say, doing this for our future longevity and for hopefully our future family.
Absolutely.
Now, I know quite often the women that certainly I've worked with have perhaps had some conditions that have made them concerned about their ability to conceive, or perhaps delayed their conception a little bit. And a couple that spring to my mind, so I know you spoke about endometriosis and your journey with that, and also polycystic ovary syndrome. How can, or can, I suppose, can nutrition and kind of lifestyle factors help women with such conditions to conceive?
I hope you found that bite-sized episode really insightful. To listen to it in full, go to the description and visit that episode on whatever platform you're listening on. One last thing before you go. As a listener, really help make this podcast successful. I would appreciate if you could subscribe and leave a quick review. Something so little means so much to me and will help so many women's lives.